Our attendance policy is that you get 2 absences without it hurting your grade. After that, if you don't have any excused reasons to be out of class, then we start docking points for too many classes missed. Again, whoops.
2 standard deviations plus or minus?
Yes. It's a very generous system. It's basically everybody gets points as long as they're trying.
Including plus 3.
Right. Plus 3.
So it would only be minus 3 standard deviations.
Yes. Yes. And like I said, we find most of the people that are getting docked points aren't ever coming anyway. And that's why they're getting docked points. Again, are you grading based on participation? Oops. 50-50. We do assign some of the grading is weighted towards participation. So you can get all the questions wrong and still get some points showing that you attended. So we're trying to kind of reward students based on their level of involvement. Most of these pictures I put in just for reference when you look at them later on. These are ways we can enter a hand Scantron if we need to into the system so they still get points. Just a list of common problems we've run into and reports that we've created to address those problems. So if I look at the common, they put a letter, the letter 0, the letter O instead of a 0 for their clicker ID. I can see a list of those and adjust. I can also look at students at the very bottom is a new report who are attending the wrong sections and then talk to those students. I can still grant them points, by the way, with that system. I can still say you're still going to get the points. We do have students from time to time that contact us that are going to be out of town, and we give them the opportunity to attend another class. I want to quickly touch on some of the things we've learned through implementing this system. Using timers on the first question is pretty critical. That just forces people to answer in a timely manner. It gets them ready. On the resulting questions, then you can pare down the amount of time they get. We typically go 45 seconds on the first question. And then on the latter questions, I give them, again, 30 to 40 seconds to answer. But as I see everybody click in, I just move on. So if I know I've got 72 students from the first question, when I hit 72 responses on the next question, I move on. Distributing questions throughout the presentation has been very key. We find that sometimes, and because inserting the questions breaks up our lecture, if you've got your pattern down and this is how you lecture, it can be as disruptive to you as it is to the students to put a question in the middle. So integrating those questions into your lectures is a bit of an art, I feel. But you also have to do it so that the students don't fall asleep in the middle of class and then have to wake up at the very end for 4 or 5 clicker questions. So we try to distribute the questions very evenly throughout the class. Once or twice we've caught ourselves where we ask one question and 30 minutes later we ask another, and that just typically you lose students at that point. We talked about the appropriate channel number problem. You've got to get that ironed out. And then one thing we found out with the conditional branching is that student responses can become very predictable. So one thing we were hoping is that each of those 6 classes would have a different result, and they all had the almost exact result. By and large, everybody researched every question and got fired. So one of the things we're looking at with conditional lectures is how do we manage it so that each class is a unique experience, then we can podcast those and students can have a more immersive environment. On the technical realm, batteries drain. Students don't think about that a whole lot. Typically what we saw, people would buy them in the spring, not use them over the summer, and then in the next fall semester the batteries would last a couple of weeks and then they would die. Almost seems like there's kind of an initial burst on the batteries and then they don't sit for a while. It's almost like they drain themselves. The students that bought them in the fall, they go all the way through the spring. It doesn't seem to cause a problem, just kind of an anecdotal thing we found. At the beginning of our lectures now, we tell students if you didn't buy your clicker this semester, carry backup batteries and a screwdriver. Just to save yourself the trauma of having your clicker die in the middle of class. How do you handle students who forget their clickers in class? I still have students coming up to me 8, 9, 10 weeks into the semester that forgot their clicker for whatever reason. We go ahead and give them the participation points for being there, which is not a lot. Might only be a few points for that day, but we don't give them points for the responses. We can't. They don't have any way to track it. And the common question about why we don't do that, well, they always get to see the right answer. So the people who write the responses down are always going to get 100%. Because we do show the right answer in class. So you have to think about that. And how do you deal with broken clickers? So if a student has got their clicker in a backpack and they drop their finance book on it, I know these things are durable. We've dropped them in water and still used them. But you can only argue with a finance book so much. So You drop something on it, or you drive over it, or I don't know what students do to these things, but if they break, how do you handle that? Do you force them to buy a new one, or what do you do from there? It's just some of the things we've come into. And I believe that's